First of all, I'm here with my colleague and friend, Minister Teresa Peruzza. I also noticed that my friend Taras Natashak is here. I want to welcome him as well. It's good to see him out. As you probably know from announcements a little earlier today, that 500 girders are being removed by the Windsor-Essex Mobility Group. I just want to review quickly where we are and what's happened. When I became minister about 8-9 months ago, we plunged ourselves into budget, and as all new ministers, into briefings. When we got through that, I started meeting with folks across the communities, looking at each of the major projects going on in each community. And certainly for all Ontarians and Canadians, and for people in the Windsor-Essex area, this project is very significant. It's a foundational project for trade. It will soon be connected to another bridge crossing. It is a great foundation for trade, economic development, and jobs. It's one of the largest transportation projects in the history of Ontario. I started to hear in May things that were concerning me as minister. We place a very, very high standard in Ontario on the safety of our roads and our bridges. We have the safest roads and bridges in North America, and that comes from uncompromising enforcement, standards, and safety. I was hearing things that first sounded a little like I didn't win the contract and I'm not happy about it. And any Minister of Transportation or Infrastructure will tell you that you get a lot of complaints. You get a lot of complaints, especially every time there's a major contract and people lose. But then I started hearing concerns from engineers and from construction companies. MPP Peruzza was the first MPP to approach me about that time, saying that she was hearing similar things and asked me to look into it. When I started hearing that the Canadian Standards Association's process approval had not been received for some of the plants in which girders were being produced, that caused me great concerns because that's a requirement of the Highway Code. I then heard that in January and February, girders had been moved onto the site supposedly for storage until approvals and engineering approvals and certification had been put in place. I discovered that not only that they had not been only moved onto the site, but they were being installed without the proper authorities. And then for all of you who've read the independent expert review report, you will know some of the cascading implications of that and some of the problems that came forth. I became very struck that there were challenges to the enforcement standards and safety going forward. So by the end of May, I had collected significant enough information that I was concerned and realized that we as a government had to act quite swiftly to the concerns. So I met with my deputy minister in early June and asked her to do a discreet inquiry. Clearly there was a problem that this information had not come to me through traditional sources. Deputy Minister Layton undertook that, came back to me about 10 days later, 2 weeks later, and said, Minister, I think there is some cause for concern. And two of the people who are here in the audience today are two of the gentlemen who are responsible for raising those concerns internally. Joey Chernick and Dennis Reagan, and Fausto Naturella, who's with me here, who quickly came into my office and said, we have some serious issues here. As a result of what I was briefed on June 19th, I then took a number of steps, immediately appointing an independent expert review. We convened 4 of the most respected structural engineers in Canada and one of the best and most experienced contract lawyers who knows the construction law. Because we had challenges with this in conforming to the Highway Code, not only getting it right, but since many of these girders were already constructed, it was challenging to get them to be remediated, if they could be, to a standard of the law, or even to know whether that was possible. And I want to thank all of the members of the panel and the people who worked with them to do that study and determination. As you know, about a month ago, the panel reported, and the panel reported 2 options. One, remove the girders, or introduce very, very robust and muscular remediation measures. I also said at the time that we would not make this a political decision. So Chief Engineer everyone has been hearing me talk about the chief engineer. Everyone wonders, who is this chief engineer guy? He's actually Mr. Steve Cripps, who's standing over there in the black jacket. And I said to Steve, you and your team have to make these decisions. These cannot be political decisions. They cannot be decisions based on legal issues or on budgetary issues. They have to be purely made on safety issues. Throughout that, Minister Perusa and I met regularly. She continued to represent the concerns of the community, and that became very quickly part of the discussion that went forward. It became very clear to me that the independent review was not enough, that the testing that was being done by Progeco was being done in Vancouver, and I wasn't satisfied as minister that that was independent enough or thorough enough. So after announcing on July 22nd the IER, on August 28th, I ordered independent, comprehensive, destructive, independent testing by the Ministry of Transportation under the direction of the chief engineer. A week ago, this past Tuesday, that the initial results of that testing were started. As a matter of fact, what happened last Tuesday is one of the girders was broken open, and we discovered that it wasn't consistent with drawings. There were materials in there that shouldn't have been in there, and it was a very problematic girder that didn't meet any standards for that. At that time, the Progeco and all of the parties, including independent engineers, were invited to oversee that. Earlier this week, I was advised, as a result of that, that the engineering community, both our engineers and project engineers, were gravely concerned by what they saw, and very quickly, Progeco moved to decide to remove the 500 girders based on their response to the test and a lack of consistency, as it was represented to me, between the drawings and what was actually in the design of the girders as they were made. So we've moved forward with that. As you know, also, during the IER hearings, revelations in late August that there were other girders made by tack welding. So the IER report that came out today, knowing as the Independent Expert Review Report 2, comments on those girders. And as a result of that, I had notified yesterday, when I was first advised that there were concerns, that the same kind of rigorous testing must be applied to the North Talbot Bridge and those girders. As a result of that, the Progeco, very, I think, positively, and I thank them for it, said it would require delays to remove one of those girders, test them, and there would be an inconvenience for the community. So they have agreed at their cost, as they have with the 500 girders at their cost, to rebuild the North Talbot Bridge to reduce the amount of time in which the bridge would be down. So those 54 girders. As you also know, the report said that there was really no issue with the girders that are holding up the landscaping that were done by a local company. The drawings were consistent, and there's a higher quality and a higher level of confidence, so there's no need to move on the locally made girders. That's pretty much where we are. I won't get into the whole history of tack welding and things. As you know, that was covered in the IEI report, and it cannot be used in Canada without prior approval. And we had a problem with that because it was used without prior approval, and those girders are being removed as well. So I think that pretty much sums up where we're at. We are now in discussions with Progeco. Minister Perusa approached me and said, is there any way we can make this work better for communities? So there is discussions going on, which I'm very optimistic about, which will look at prioritizing the connection of neighborhood streets across the highway. So we will see, sooner than even expected in the original plan, each of the neighborhood through streets being connected. Progeco is telling us that the delay will be months, not years. We will have to extend the construction schedule for less than a year. There is no cost to the taxpayer. The assignment of risk is all to the company. They bear responsibility and cost, and they, consistent with the project agreement, they have agreed to fully pick up all of the costs associated with the girders. And as I said, this has been entirely an engineering decision, so I'm going to ask Steve to come up to answer all your engineering questions. And I want to thank Steve and Fausto and the team at MTO for their rigorous work. This was not the summer they had planned. I think every weekend they know more about girders than any other group of engineers maybe in the country right now. They will continue to do that oversight. There is also an audit that is going to be done of all components of the structures, the water, there's drainage systems, all of that, to make sure that there is high standards of compliance. There is also additional monitoring, again, at the cost of the Progeco. They will be paying for to have a heightened layer of monitoring as we go forward. And that, I think, will assure that we will have what may turn out to be just about the safest structure we've ever built, because I don't think we've ever had so many engineers paying so much attention to the structure. I want to thank particularly the people of Windsor and the Windsor-Essex region for their patience, for their interest, for their pride in their community, and for the support of what is a project that we think builds a pretty strong foundation for their economy, for jobs, and for their kids. So